Sparkles welcome, dear dreamer sparkles as the world outside drifts into peaceful slumber, take a deep breath and let the calm settle within you. Tonight, I invite you to join me on a journey to a land of wonder and magic, where the whispers of gods and the allure of gold weave a tale of mystery and transformation. So, find a cozy spot, close your eyes, and let go of the day's worries. Allow yourself to drift into the soothing rhythm of this story, and let the golden dreams of King Midas carry you into a peaceful, restful sleep. The night was warm, and a soft golden glow filled the palace of King Midas. The great halls, lined with gilded pillars and golden statues, shimmered in the flickering torchlight. Outside, the stars stretched across the sky like scattered jewels, and the distant hum of cicadas filled the air with a lullaby of the ancient world. Midas sat upon his throne, draped in robes woven with golden thread. In his hands, he turned a small goblet, watching as the candlelight danced across its polished surface. His kingdom was rich beyond measure, his name whispered across distant lands in awe and admiration. Yet, as he gazed at the wealth surrounding him, a strange emptiness crept into his heart, one he could not name, yet one that refused to leave. He had spent his life gathering treasures, amassing wealth that kings and merchants alike could only dream of. But tonight, the gold felt heavy, as if it no longer shined as brightly as it once did. Midas sighed and set the goblet down, leaning back in his throne. Outside, a gentle breeze drifted through the open balcony doors, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the distant murmur of the river that wound its way through his land. And then, it came, the whisper. Soft as a sigh, it wove through the air, curling around the golden columns and slipping through the open halls. It was not the wind, nor the distant voices of his guards. It was something else. Something ancient. Something divine. Do you dream, King Midas? Midas sat up, his heart suddenly still. The voice was barely more than a breath, yet it filled the vast chamber as if the very walls had spoken. He turned his head, searching for its source, but there was nothing, only the endless stretch of his golden kingdom, bathed in the glow of moonlight. He rose from his throne, his sandals tapping softly against the marble floor as he stepped toward the balcony. The sky was deep and endless, the constellations gleaming like stories waiting to be told. He had heard tales of the gods speaking to mortals in their sleep, whispering secrets in the quiet hours of the night. But this was different. He was not dreaming. He was awake. Do you dream? The voice asked again, softer this time, like the rustling of olive leaves in a summer breeze. Midas hesitated. Who speaks? He called, his voice steady, yet touched with something he could not quite name. The air remained still. The world held its breath. And then, a new sound rose, a distant melody, low and rich, like a lyre being plucked in the darkness. It was music unlike any he had heard before, its notes drifting through the night like golden threads, weaving a song that wrapped around his very soul. Midas closed his eyes. The music called to something deep within him, something buried beneath years of wealth and ambition. He had spent his life shaping his world into gold, yet here, in this quiet moment, he felt as though he stood on the edge of something far greater. The voice spoke once more, its whisper curling through the air like a tendril of smoke. Gold is the weight of your heart, King Midas. But what is the shape of your dreams? Midas opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, the wind rose, carrying the whisper away into the night. The music faded, melting into the rustling trees and the murmuring river below. The palace stood silent once more, bathed in golden moonlight, as if nothing had happened at all. But something had changed. Midas pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath his robes. The whisper lingered in his mind, like a dream just out of reach. What was the shape of his dreams? He did not know. Yet, as he turned from the balcony and stepped back into the golden glow of his halls, he had the strange feeling that, soon, he would find out. The morning sun spilled golden light over the palace of King Midas, its rays catching the gilded rooftops and shimmering statues that lined the grand courtyard. Yet, despite the wealth that surrounded him, the king's mind was consumed by the whisper from the night before. The words still lingered in his thoughts, like a song half remembered, stirring something deep within him. Midas had always believed that gold was the purest form of power, a treasure that could shape the world to his liking. And yet, as he wandered through his halls, past columns wrapped in golden vines and fountains that glowed like molten sunlight, he felt a strange disquiet settle in his heart. Was there truly something beyond gold? Something greater? Lost in thought, he made his way to the temple at the edge of his palace grounds. It was a place of offering, where he paid homage to the gods who had blessed him with prosperity. He knelt before the altar, lighting a small flame in the name of Dionysus, the god of revelry and transformation. As the fire flickered to life, a warm breeze stirred the air, carrying with it the scent of ripe grapes and wildflowers. A presence filled the space, unseen but undeniable. The very air shimmered, bending as if reality itself had softened. And then, from the golden glow, a figure emerged. Dionysus. He stood tall and radiant, his form shifting between shadow and light. His eyes, ancient and knowing, held the weight of countless stories. A wreath of ivy and vine crowned his head, and his robes flowed like liquid dusk, shimmering with unseen stars. Midas bowed low, his heart quickening in reverence. King Midas, Dionysus spoke, his voice smooth as flowing wine. I have heard your silent yearning, felt the tremor of longing in your soul. You seek something, though you do not yet know its name. Midas lifted his head, searching the god's face. I have wealth beyond measure, yet still I dream. Last night, a voice whispered to me, speaking of the shape of my dreams. Tell me, O Great One, what does it mean? Dionysus regarded him for a long moment before a slow smile curved his lips. You have been faithful in your devotion, and so I grant you a gift. A gift as radiant as the sun, as eternal as the stars. Henceforth, all that you touch shall turn to gold. A hush fell over the temple, the words hanging in the air like an enchantment. Midas felt his breath catch in his throat. The very thing he had always prized above all else, the dream of limitless gold, was now his to command. He looked down at his hands, ordinary and human, yet now imbued with divine power. Gold, he whispered, as if testing the word upon his tongue. Everything I touch. Dionysus nodded, his expression unreadable. Use it wisely, King Midas. And remember, gifts of the gods are blessings, but they may also be burdens. With that, the god stepped backward, his form dissolving into golden mist, vanishing like morning dew beneath the rising sun. The air settled, and silence returned to the temple. But something had changed. The very air around Midas pulsed with unseen magic, a hum of power resting just beneath his skin. Heart pounding, he reached down, brushing his fingertips over the base of the altar. In an instant, the stone shimmered, transforming before his eyes. It was no longer cool, solid marble, it had become gold, flawless and gleaming in the morning light. A slow, wondrous smile spread across his lips. The gift was real. With newfound excitement, Midas turned and strode from the temple, eager to test the full extent of his power. He touched a branch of an olive tree, and it hardened into golden splendor. He ran his hand along the petals of a rose, and they stiffened, capturing their beauty in a frozen eternity. Even the water in a nearby fountain glowed, its rippling surface hardening into liquid gold. Everywhere he turned, his world transformed beneath his touch, his kingdom shimmering with new brilliance. His laughter echoed through the halls, rich with delight, as servants and courtiers gasped in astonishment at the miracle before them. The golden dream had begun. Yet, beyond the palace walls, where the wind carried the whispers of gods and mortals alike, something unseen lingered. The words of Dionysus hovered in the air, a warning wrapped in mystery. Gifts of the gods are blessings, but they may also be burdens. But Midas, lost in the wonder of his newfound power, did not yet hear them. The dawn that followed was unlike any before. As the first rays of sunlight stretched over the kingdom of Phrygia, they touched upon a world remade in gold. The olive groves shimmered, their once green branches now heavy with golden fruit. The rivers ran no more, frozen in gilded splendor. Even the birds, caught in their morning flight, had turned into delicate golden statues, their wings forever poised against the sky. Midas rose early, eager to bask in the brilliance of his new world. He strode through the palace gardens, marveling at how each flower, each blade of grass had transformed beneath his touch. Servants and courtiers followed in his wake, their faces a mixture of awe and hesitation. "Behold," Midas declared, spreading his arms wide. "The gods have blessed me beyond all others. This is a kingdom that shall never wither, never fade. A kingdom of eternal gold." The people murmured amongst themselves, unsure whether to celebrate or recoil in quiet dread. The beauty of gold was undeniable, but so was its weight, its stillness. The air was thick, unmoving, as if even the wind had turned to metal. Midas, oblivious to their unease, continued his journey through the palace. Every touch brought another transformation. Curtains hardened into sheets of gold, goblets and plates solidified in his grasp, even the cushions on his throne lost their softness, turning to cold, unyielding metal. By midday, the first signs of trouble had begun to surface. A servant, carrying a tray of figs and bread, hesitated as she approached. Midas, caught in his delight, reached for the fruit. The moment his fingers brushed against the soft skin of a fig, it stiffened, gleaming in the sunlight. He frowned but shrugged, taking a piece of bread instead. It too turned to solid gold between his fingertips. His stomach clenched. The weight of realization pressed against him like the very gold he had wished for. He turned to his attendants, his smile faltering. "Bring me water," he commanded. A silver goblet was placed in his hands. The water inside sloshed gently as he lifted it to his lips. The moment it met his mouth, it hardened, a frozen wave of gold that clattered uselessly against his teeth. Midas lowered the goblet slowly, his hands trembling. A cold dread settled in his chest. Was this, too, part of the god's gift? Beyond the palace walls, the golden trees stood silent. No leaves rustled, no rivers sang. The world was trapped in a beautiful, breathless hush. And for the first time, Midas felt the weight of gold as something more than fortune, he felt it as fate. The sun climbed higher, casting long beams of golden light across the silent kingdom. The air was thick, stifling, as though the very breath of the world had been stilled by Midas's touch. Where once the gentle rustle of leaves and the bubbling laughter of fountains filled the palace grounds, now there was only an eerie hush, an absence of life beneath the dazzling facade. Midas sat upon his throne, the weight of his own power pressing upon him like a chain forged of his own making. His hands, once steady with pride, now trembled as he gazed upon them. The gift of Dionysus had granted him everything he had ever desired, wealth beyond imagination, a kingdom where even the soil shimmered beneath his feet. And yet, the more he beheld his golden dominion, the more his heart recoiled in silent terror. A small figure entered the chamber, a young girl, her golden curls bouncing as she ran toward him. Marigold, his beloved daughter, the light of his life. She had always been the one thing untouched by his hunger for wealth, a source of joy in a world obsessed with riches. Her laughter had once filled these halls, and now, in the heavy silence of his golden world, it was the only sound he longed to hear. "Father," she cried, her arms outstretched as she rushed to embrace him. Midas's heart lurched in his chest. "No! Stop!" he bellowed, thrusting his hands outward as if to ward her away. But she did not stop. She did not understand. Before he could turn away, before he could retreat, her small hands grasped his. A single moment, an instant of warmth, before her fingers, her arms, her very breath, stilled. A shimmer spread over her like a creeping frost, and in mere heartbeats, where once stood his laughing child, now there was only a golden statue, frozen mid-motion, her face still alight with joy. A scream ripped from Midas's throat, raw and broken, a sound that echoed through the silent halls and shattered the stillness of his golden dream. He stumbled back, his hands clutching his chest as though he could tear the curse from his flesh. He fell to his knees before her, reaching for her once more, only to stop himself, his hands hovering mere inches away. Tears burned his eyes, yet no weeping could change what had been done. No power in the world could undo his touch. The kingdom of gold was complete. And in its heart, Midas knelt in silence, surrounded by lifeless splendor. Outside, the golden trees stood unmoving. The rivers gleamed but did not flow. The birds, their wings trapped mid-flight, watched with unseeing eyes. The silence of gold stretched across the land, vast and endless. And Midas, the king of this eternal wealth, wept in a world that no longer wept with him. The silence of gold stretched over the kingdom, suffocating in absolute. The once thriving land of Phrygia stood still, a gleaming monument to Midas's folly. Every tree, every stone, every creature, frozen in the unyielding grasp of his cursed touch. But amid this lifeless splendor, one thing remained unchanged. The river. Midas stood upon the golden banks of its waters, staring into its depths. Unlike the fountains in his palace, which had solidified into motionless cascades, the river still flowed, dark and shimmering beneath the midday sun. It twisted and turned through the land like a living thread, untouched by his gift, or his curse. Hope flickered within him, fragile as a dying ember. If there was one thing left in the world that resisted his golden grasp, then perhaps, just perhaps, it held the answer he sought. Driven by desperation, Midas knelt at the water's edge. His reflection wavered on the surface, his once proud features now lined with sorrow. He cupped his hands and plunged them into the cool depths, half expecting the river to harden at his touch. But it did not. The water remained as it was, slipping through his fingers like silk. A breath of wind stirred the reeds along the shore, and in that moment, Midas heard it again. The whisper. King Midas, it sighed, weaving through the rustling rushes, curling around him like mist. You seek release, do you not? Midas clenched his fists, his voice raw with anguish. I have cursed my land. I have cursed my daughter. What must I do to undo this fate? The river's surface rippled, and from its depths, a figure emerged. Not a god, not a mortal, but something between. A nymph, her hair flowing like water, her eyes as deep and knowing as the tides. She regarded him with neither scorn nor pity, only an understanding that sent shivers down his spine. The gifts of the gods cannot be cast aside like trinkets, she murmured. But water has always been the language of change. If you wish to be free, you must give yourself to the river. Midas hesitated. Give myself? What do you mean? The nymph extended a hand, droplets of water trailing from her fingertips. Bathe in its depths. Let the river take from you what was never meant to be yours. A tremor passed through Midas. The thought of losing his golden touch should have filled him with dread. It was, after all, the ultimate power, the wealth of eternity. But as he thought of Marigold's frozen form, her small hands locked in an unbroken grasp of gold, the choice was no choice at all. With a final breath, Midas stepped forward. The river embraced him instantly, cool and cleansing, washing over his skin. A sudden sensation rushed through him, a warmth that was not fire, but life. The weight upon his heart, the shimmer upon his fingertips, the terrible brilliance of his curse, all of it unraveled, swept away into the current. When he emerged, gasping beneath the golden sky, he felt it. The touch of the world. The roughness of the river stones beneath his hands. The breeze curling through his damp hair. The softness of the reeds brushing against his skin. And he knew. The curse was gone. Heart pounding, Midas turned and ran. He did not stop to admire the river's mercy, nor did he pause to thank the nymph who had saved him. His only thought, his only prayer, was of Marigold. He reached the palace, breathless and trembling, and fell before the statue that had once been his daughter. With shaking hands, he reached out, not in fear, but in hope, and pressed his fingers to hers. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a breath. A shudder. A golden shimmer retreating like a fading sunset. And in its place, soft skin, warm and real. Marigold blinked, confused, as if waking from a dream. "Father," she murmured, tilting her head. "Why are you crying?" Midas pulled her into his arms, his laughter breaking into sobs of joy. Around him, the palace seemed to exhale, fountains flowed once more, trees rustled in the wind, and life returned to the kingdom of Phrygia. The golden dream had ended. But a new one had begun. The kingdom of Phrygia stirred with life once more. The rivers ran freely, the trees swayed in the wind, and the birds took flight, their golden stillness melting away into vibrant motion. Midas stood at the heart of his palace, watching as his world awakened from its silent prison. Yet, despite the joy of his people, a shadow of unease lingered in his heart. The gods did not grant gifts so easily, nor did they take them back without consequence. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long golden streaks across the land, Midas found himself drawn back to the temple where his curse had begun. The scent of wild grapes and crushed ivy filled the air, a lingering presence of Dionysus himself. Midas knew he could not run from what had been given, he had to face the god once more. He knelt before the altar, placing his hands upon the cool stone. "O great Dionysus," he murmured, "I have tasted the weight of gold, and I have learned its sorrow. I return to you, humbled, and ask, what is the price of my redemption?" The air shimmered. A low hum vibrated through the temple walls, and the flames of the torches flickered as if caught in a breath of unseen wind. Then, from the golden mist, the god appeared. Dionysus stood as he had before, radiant, crowned with ivy, his presence both intoxicating and terrifying. Yet this time, his gaze bore something different, amusement, perhaps, or the quiet satisfaction of a lesson well taught. "You have learned swiftly, King Midas," Dionysus said, his voice like the lull of a river before a storm. "Tell me, was it not the gift of all gifts? Gold beyond measure, wealth without end?" Midas lowered his head. "It was never a gift, it was a burden. A curse disguised as a dream." Dionysus tilted his head, studying him. "And what have you learned?" Midas hesitated, then took a breath. "That gold is not the weight of my heart. That wealth without life is nothing but emptiness. That love, laughter, and the simple touch of another are worth more than all the treasure in the world." A slow smile curved the god's lips. "Then you are wiser than when I last stood before you." Midas clenched his fists. "Tell me, O god of revelry, why did you give me such a gift, knowing the sorrow it would bring?" Dionysus chuckled, a sound like rippling wine poured into a goblet. "Because, King Midas, men do not learn from wisdom handed to them. They learn from wisdom earned. I could have told you that gold would never bring you joy, but would you have believed me?" Midas was silent. He knew the answer. The god stepped forward, placing a firm hand on the king's shoulder. "You have returned what was never meant to be yours, and in doing so, you have reclaimed what truly matters. But know this, Midas, the gods do not simply take away. We give, and we shape, and we leave behind something new." Midas furrowed his brow. "Something new?" Dionysus's eyes gleamed with something unreadable. "You will see." With that, the god stepped back, his form dissolving into golden mist. The air grew still, the torches burned steady once more, and Midas was left alone in the temple, the weight of Dionysus's words settling deep within him. He did not yet understand their meaning, but as he stepped out into the night, he had the sense that his journey was far from over. The curse had been lifted, but his path, the path to true wisdom, had only just begun. The gift had been returned, but the lesson would remain forever. The palace of Midas stood bathed in the light of dawn, no longer a prison of gold, but a home once more. The sun cast warm, amber hues across the land, illuminating the olive trees that now swayed freely in the morning breeze. The river, once frozen in lifeless metal, now ran clear, singing softly as it wove through the fields. The birds had returned, filling the air with their songs, and the laughter of people echoed through the streets once more. Midas stood on his balcony, overlooking his kingdom, a quiet peace settling within him. The weight that had pressed upon his heart for so long was gone. His hands, once cursed to bring lifeless gold to everything they touched, now rested against the cool stone railing, feeling the warmth of the morning sun. For the first time in a long while, he felt whole. Yet something lingered, a whisper, an echo of the question that had started it all. Gold is the weight of your heart, King Midas. But what is the shape of your dreams? He had spent his life chasing wealth, believing it to be the answer to all things. But what had it given him? Power, yes. Recognition, yes. But in the end, it had left him empty, cut off from the world, isolated in a kingdom of cold splendor. It was only when the gift was taken from him, when he had nearly lost all that truly mattered, that he had finally understood. Midas turned from the balcony and walked through the palace halls, now vibrant with life. Servants bustled about, speaking in hushed voices, their faces no longer shadowed with fear. The golden statues, once frozen in unnatural stillness, had been restored to their true forms. His daughter, Zoe, whom he had feared lost forever, ran through the halls, laughing as she played with her handmaidens, her touch warm and alive. She saw him and ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Midas knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Are you happy, my child?" he asked softly. She smiled up at him, her golden eyes shining, not with the glow of metal, but with the light of life. "Yes, Father. The world is beautiful again." Midas exhaled, his heart swelling. "Yes," he murmured. "Yes, it is." That evening, he called his council together. Once, he would have spoken only of trade, of wealth, of the endless expansion of his golden empire. But tonight, his words were different. "We have been given a second chance," he told them, his voice strong but gentle. "Gold is no longer our God. It is the earth that feeds us, the rivers that sustain us, and the people who make this kingdom thrive. Let us turn our hands not to greed, but to creation." Let us build not for wealth, but for the generations that will come after us." The counselors murmured among themselves, exchanging glances of surprise. Some looked hesitant, but others nodded in quiet agreement. It would take time for change to settle, for old habits to break. But Midas knew that the first step had been taken. That night, as he lay upon his bed, a warm breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the gentle murmur of the river. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in many nights, he dreamed. He did not dream of gold. He dreamed of a kingdom where the fields stretched wide, where children laughed and played, where the rivers ran clear and the people thrived in harmony. He dreamed of hands building, planting, shaping, not to hoard, but to create. He dreamed of a world rich not in gold, but in love, wisdom, and the simple joys of life. And as he dreamed, the whisper returned, curling softly around him like a lullaby. "This is the shape of your dreams, King Midas." Midas smiled in his sleep, the weight of gold finally lifted from his heart. At last, he was free.